Welcome to Constructed Futures. I'm Hugh Seaton. Today I'm here with Michal Porter, research scientist at DuPont. Michal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Hugh.
So I'm really excited. You're the second person I've had from DuPont come on and talk about all the amazing things you guys are doing to make the built world better and more efficient and more climate friendly. With all of that as background, tell us what you do and what you spend your time on.
Okay, I am a chemical engineer. So that was my training back in grad school days about 15, 16 years ago. I came to work for this business. So I'm a researcher here. We're a business that sells, as many people know, we sell insulation. We sell some air sealing products as well. And so I get to do kind of further out there product development work in the portion of R&D I'm a part of. So like I said, I've been in this business and in this role for 15 years. And almost all of that has been working on insulation foams. And a little bit more of that was when I first started, I worked on changing up the formulation to enable the use of a new fire retardant additive in one of our products, Styrofoam. So right off the bat, I was exposed to the concept of like sustainability, putting, safer chemicals in our product, enabling, insulation to save us energy. So right from the get-go, my role had a flavor of sustainability and learning how insulation works in buildings to save money and save energy and be better for the planet. It's been part of my career almost since day one. And now I'm part of a large team that is working on, even more advanced, more sustainable products. Nothing we sell today, but stuff we aspire to sell one day, and listening to the customer on, what they want for the future and how do we develop that or invent that to satisfy those needs for our customer and for the planet.
I love it. And I think insulation is one of those things that everybody knows is important, but probably doesn't spend a ton of time thinking about. When you think about sustainability and your work, what is the biggest focus? Is it making buildings themselves more efficient, or the production of the insulation, the deployment, or even kind of after the building has been taken down, what happens to it later? Are you focused on that whole life cycle, or is there one area that really is most of the focus?
So first and foremost, everything that we do like in the lab is done in the spirit of we cannot make the product perform worse. Oftentimes in R&D, especially in this business, we're forced to make changes to our formulation because ingredients or components become more expensive than what we want to provide to the market, or we learn more about the ingredients and components we put in our product, and we want to eliminate them and replace them with something that's going to be better for the environment. Think about ozone depletion, that kind of thing. So a lot of our work really goes hand in hand with learning more and regulatory actions, kind of staying ahead of the game when it comes to, putting a product out there that's going to be good for the planet and good for our customers. So a lot of it is driven around that, maintaining performance while keeping up with the latest and greatest of what we understand to be, acceptable to put out there in the marketplace. We, thinking about energy efficiency is a big part of that, but everything is always evolving. So, when I first started, it was more about, we've just got to maintain the look of the product. Our customers don't want it to look different. They want it to perform the same if we change an ingredient. But, over the last 15 years, I've been working on this business for 15 years, but there has been a huge shift in, we've got to think about what can we do to our current product mix and our future products to have less of an impact on the planet in terms of global warming potential. Ozone depletion was a really big topic 10 or so years ago. Now we've moved on. Ozone depleting chemicals, we've kind of reduced those or eliminated those from our product, but really we're very, very driven by carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions and how that impacts global warming and all the climate change aspects that we're seeing kind of come to reality in our world. So we're very much tied to that, not because it's the reality is hitting us or we're just more knowledgeable, but it's becoming more and more important to our industry.
That makes sense. And when you talk about the changes that you've made, it's interesting how 1 year to the next might seem quite incremental, but do that 15 years in a row and you're really in a different place.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in the past a little bit, but Talk to me about how you view innovation and these changes. How is that managed across, across the organization, but also across time?
Well, like I said, a lot of regulatory actions, require us to make changes. But one thing I've learned over the course of being in this role as long as I have, and working with our strategic marketing group, is we really have to be able to know how to listen to what our industry, what our customers want. And it's not always a simple answer. There's not necessarily just one customer. I mean, there's the end customer, which is, the person that's going to live or work or play in the building that we're helping to build. But there's many people in between that are influencing decisions, and they all have varying levels of what's important to them. I think being able to understand what your customers want and then translate that to what you need to do, all the way back in the lab, that's been the biggest, I think, realization over these last few years. And it's not always easy to translate what they want to what you can do on your end. I mean, everyone always wants lower cost products, right? That's always the number one on the list. But really teasing out what's really important and what's going to move the needle in a meaningful way. Like I said, with global warming potential and climate change, influence on climate change, that's been something that's really, really developed in the last few years, and understanding what does it look like to give that to our customer. They don't necessarily have all the same level of understanding of what it looks like for a product to be more sustainable. Sustainability is a very broad term. So we have to learn how to be very specific and make changes to our product that are going to be impactful and not just be, years of work and resources invested, and then it doesn't really make a big enough change to what we were looking for that would resonate with the end user.
That makes sense. And I think,
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you're saying there's at least two directions of innovation. One of them is response to the market and or regulators, where you're saying, okay, we need to get over there. Let's figure out how to get there. But often in a company like DuPont, there's breakthroughs either somewhere else or somewhere internally anyway, that also brings you to a new place. How often is that happening where somebody says, hey, I've just found a new way to insulate things or extrude them or whatever it might be that the market wasn't per se asking for, but nevertheless you're able to bring some attribute or some set of attributes to a whole new level because of an internal innovation versus much more incremental across the board innovation where you're matching the market where it needs you to be.
Yeah, I can think of a project, that I'm working on now, and then I can also think of a project that we've already launched. And maybe I'll start with the first, which is, if we want to lower, we talk so much about carbon footprint, or global warming potential is a more technical term for that. But as we look to okay, how are we going to lower the carbon footprint of our product, like styrofoam? There's regulatory pressures, and then there's internal innovation where you're like, hey, I think we have a solution here. And so one of the biggest changes we made just a couple of years ago was changing out our blowing agent package, moving from a very high global warming potential package to a much lower, 94% lower, in fact, global warming potential blowing agent package. Now, that is something that we set out to do. And along the way, we start thinking, okay, that's going to be a 94% reduction. But what about that last 6%? Because really our aspiration is to get as close to net zero as we possibly can. So it really caused us to then look closer at the remaining 6% carbon footprint in our product after that blowing agent conversion, and start to creatively think, what are we going to do next? Because it's always about that next step. You're never done. And that has inspired some really new ideas that are still in the works. And we're still, it's one of my favorite projects here internally, but it's really challenged us to think, not to just do things, that everyone else might think to do, but really change the game, change something in a big way that's going to provide a whole new category of product for people that can give them beyond what they were expecting from these regulatory changes, or just that obvious big next step. And those are the difficult ones to do, is to think, okay, what's going to be second and third and fourth on our list as we drive towards zero. I also think about, in a way, that's great for researchers like me, because the easy answer is, okay, those pay the bills, and they help us to go home at the end of the day and think, okay, we did something today. I checked that box, but it really gets our creative juices flowing. And I think, that difficult, the answer is not really clear. It really drives the really cool ideas out of people.
And your question makes me think of our froth pack reformulation, trying to get out of those high global warming potential materials.
I think everyone in the industry making that type of product, a spray foam, polyurethane foam, they were all kind of thinking they were going to go in the same direction, with obviously some differences between our secret ingredients, of course, but that transition from like these blowing agents to those blowing agents, I think that was what everyone expected. But what our team did was say, what if we did something really, really different? And it's going to be more, difficult, but what if we could figure out a way to utilize an even better alternative blowing agent to what all of our competitors are doing, and have, what we bunny hop to be an even lower number than what's going to be expected. So
our froth pack reformulation not only, reduced the global warming potential by eliminating one of the blowing agents that we're regulating out, but it also required us to figure out a brand new way to put it together and how we process it. So it took some capital investment, but we really did things differently. And because of that, we were really able to set ourselves apart.
And hopefully we'll be getting our environmental product declaration completed soon, so that we can really articulate how ours really stands out from our competitors in that way. Again, it was the R&D team looking at, okay, here's the 4 different ways we could go about this problem, and this one could really, really be a game changer. It's really, really different than what everybody else is going to be doing, and taking on that challenge and taking pride in not only convincing leadership that this is the way to go, but also seeing it through all the way to execution. I know that's like the pinnacle of a researcher's career, is to be able to take on that challenge, see the solution, and have it be something very different than what everybody else is doing in the industry.
Yeah, I really love that. And I want to pull some things out of what you said. One of them is the way you describe the work. It's about the people who are doing this because they love to problem solve and they love the problems they're solving. But it's, people who are probably already that kind of person, and then through education and other experiences have just become in love with the idea of solving problems. And they're probably thinking about the problem on Sunday night when the kids are asleep, kind of thing.
Okay, you've talked to researchers before, it sounds like.
That's
yes,
right.
that is us to a T.
Well,
And I've worked for this business for my whole, adult career. So I can't speak specifically to how it would be in other organizations. But one of my favorite things about working for this particular R&D community is the people. I don't know if it's just this a sign of the times, but regardless of the broad age that is represented by people in this, it's not like we're all in the same generation in the R&D community here. We've got a broad range of ages, but everyone has really just come together on this idea of like, what we do matters. And we want it that way. We're motivated by work that matters and it has a purpose. And I think internal, like employee driven efforts fuel that culture. The corporation itself offers training and just socializing the concepts that we need to be aware of. Things like understanding what is the role of the built environment in global, greenhouse gas emissions. Do we play a significant role or a small role? And I think they've done a great job just helping us understand, like, we have a role to play as far as getting the whole planet's, greenhouse gas emissions down. Depending on what you look at, whether global or North America, we're tapping on 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the built environment. That includes the operational, energy and fuels that are burned to heat and cool and condition and live in those spaces. We call that operational carbon. And also all the materials that go into the buildings that we're building, the new buildings, and the materials that go into that. Those have a carbon footprint associated with that. We call that embodied carbon because it's really embodied in the building and it's all up front. These 2 terms have become everyday vocabulary around here. We have lunch and learns. We have groups that meet to talk about, the state of the climate and what are we doing, and we talk about projects and how they're aligned with carbon emissions reduction goals for our business or for the company. We take great pride whenever we have something accomplished in the lab that gets translated to the real product and it actually makes a difference. One of my favorite things about the shelter business, which is just one part of the larger DuPont, is that we have our own sustainability report every year. Of course, there's one that comes out, I think, in late spring. You should be seeing it soon. That'll be the DuPont sustainability report. And then our business actually has one that we put out just for us. And we have goals and we track our progress towards those goals just for our little part of DuPont. And not all businesses can, have that. We've been doing it for, I think, 3 years now. But that really helps tie in. The people that work here can see the results and the fruition of their labor in those terms. It gives us motivation that what we do matters and that it is making a difference, and it's trackable. We're all, science nerds. We love to see the data. And so I think having that feedback loop, the report, and being involved in putting that report together, great internal communications on what it means to be sustainable, what it doesn't mean to be sustainable.
I love that you went where I was going to go for point number 2. So point 1 is that the people that are part of your group do this because they love the problems, that they love to solve the problems, they love having solved the problem, but probably don't wait too long before the next one, because that's half the point. But the organization itself, I mean, there's something special about especially large organizations that manage to create a culture of creativity. I mean, the difference between a place where creativity and problem solving is well directed, well managed, and well recognized versus one that is not is stark. And I've been in organizations typically more on the marketing side where I've seen both. And the work that comes out and the progress that gets made is just, it's not even, you can't even compare. And you've gone through a number of different ways that DuPont encourages and recognizes and celebrates, which is super exciting.
Another thing I like, Hugh, is that it's not all, rose-colored glasses. I think there's a reality with trying to drive more sustainable innovations. And that is, it's hard. And it's hard to do it when you don't have a bottomless, vat of money to draw upon. You have to be selective on what's going to make sense and not tie up an excessive amount of resources, whether that is, actual spending, capital investment, or just your time. Our time is very valuable to the company. So you really have to discern sometimes between different options, which one really makes the most sense. And I think our leadership does a really good job at encouraging that decision making, and with that idea of like we are a business and we do have to keep ourselves alive so that we can continue to do good work. So we are held to things like revenue and margin and cost and price and all these financial terms. So it's still a business, but we want to build in like making the right decisions for what's good for the planet, what's good for people, and what's good for the company as well. You have to consider that, like, called the triple bottom line. At least that's what they called it 10 years ago. That concept of you have to satisfy all of those things. This is, we're not just doing what feels good, but really what makes sense for all three of those elements. And our leadership is very transparent about that. It's not all, easy. They recognize the difficulty and the necessity to balance those elements, both profitability and sustainability together. And it is possible.
Yep. Well, that's the point, right? That's good management. That's paying attention to the details and not checking in once a quarter and hoping it's going well, but actually managing. Yeah. Which leads me to another question, and that is, everything has failure in it, right? How do you guys manage failure in your processes?
Well, it's funny you mentioned failure. We try not to be afraid of failure. A few years ago, a real popular phrase here was like, let's just fail fast. We want to fail fast and celebrate those failures, quickly deciding when an idea is not going to work out so you can pivot to a better idea, or at least the next one on your list.
Right.
And we actually have an annual celebration of failures. We call it Dead Projects Day. So every year around Halloween, and this just speaks again to the culture. We've really embraced it here at my site, especially in my R&D group. But Dead Projects Day, we always do it around Halloween. We dress up in costumes and we celebrate the death of projects from the year before. And it's really a place for us to come and with no shame talk about, okay, here was this project. We started it. This was our original hypothesis. We thought this was going to be, these were our assumptions. And we got about this far down there and we realized we discovered this did not align with our assumptions. It didn't make sense. And we had to make the difficult decision to kill the project. And believe me, it is hard when you've worked on something for a few months or a few years. It's hard to just let it go because you really want to see that solution. You want to figure out the answer, but sometimes it just doesn't make good sense, or you hit some technical limitation that we're just not ready to take on, or just not the right position to do so. So having that kind of end goal of, well, at least this would be a good example for dead projects. I think that kind of takes the shame and allows us to fail fast so that we can move on to, the next opportunity.
I love that. That is so good. Dead Projects Day near Halloween.
Yes.
I can imagine how much fun that is. But it speaks to the fact that people don't want to say I failed unless you've created some kind of valve and mechanism for it. Because I think if there isn't something like that, something cultural, something that's outside of just managers saying it's okay to fail fast and then never saying it again, it kind of fades because it doesn't feel good no matter what happens. It doesn't feel good that the thing you thought would work won't or doesn't. So no matter what, you have to do a little more. You have to do a little extra to give people, ongoing, durable permission to say, we're going to cut bait here. This isn't working. Let's stop. Let's move resources. Otherwise, it's, you're kind of motoring along, hoping that maybe it'll turn around, which wastes everybody's time and so on. So that's a really exciting way to kind of handle it culturally.
Yeah. And, you got to think about your time there's opportunity cost. If I'm working on this and I'm beating this, I'm trying to get this to work and I'm not letting it go. I'm keeping my own, my resources, my skill set away from another, project that might be waiting for that proof of concept series of experiments that really will demonstrate that we could really have a winner, in our back pocket. So, I always think about, it's not about a personal failure. It's like, okay, now I can divert my skills and abilities to something else, which gets me to a win faster than if I just continue to try and make this, inevitable failure stay alive.
Love it. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit to what you see coming, like the focus that you're thinking of in the future.
So the built environment, as I've mentioned before, is a substantial portion of carbon emissions on a global scale. And it's not just one solution that's gonna get that number to zero. But there's a number of things, I forget who coined this. There's like a triple strategy around this, triple bottom line. And there's a triple strategy, but all good things come in threes, maybe. So for the built environment, this triple strategy, and I've seen it articulated in different forms, but it's effectively, we need to drive energy efficiency. That's a huge part of the solution to drive the built environment to zero. So drive energy efficiency of the entire built environment to the highest standard that we have the technology to operate at. Secondly is electrify everything. If you can operate your entire building and all the materials that go into it, all stemming from electricity, then as a separate effort, as the energy sector builds their greener energy grid, then we're ready for that. As our built environment relies on fossil fuels, on-site burning of fossil fuels like natural gas or propane, that if we can convert that to electric, then we can tap into the future low carbon electric grid. But, a gas furnace is just never going to be able to utilize that. So electrify everything is kind of the second part of the strategy. And then building with low carbon materials, that embodied carbon I mentioned a few minutes ago, that's kind of the third leg of the triple strategy. So we've got to have buildings that are built to consume as little energy as possible. What energy they do need to use needs to come from an electric grid so that future green electric grid can provide a very low carbon energy source to that building. And then all the material that goes into that, each building that we build, we need to minimize the carbon that's inherent in those building products. What I love about working in this business is that our products kind of touch on two of those things. Insulation and air sealing are the main purpose in them existing is to allow that structure, whether it's a residence, a small business, or a big hospital. That insulation and air sealing is meant to just create a nice little closed system of a building so that all the internal air can be conditioned and can be held at that condition for a long period of time. You don't have air leaking out. You don't have air leaking in to mess with your perfect little homeostasis. That's the concept of insulation and air sealing. So obviously energy efficiency, we play in that space. And then we also have the opportunity, just like any other manufacturer, to continue to reduce the carbon that goes into making our products. I mentioned the blowing agent conversion. That was a big one because we were using some blowing agents that had a lot of carbon associated with them at the end of life. But as we want to drive that to zero, and then as part of that, we want to be thinking about future insulation. If there's a way that we can reuse our insulation, circularity kind of comes into play of the future embodied carbon of future buildings. Is if we can reuse building products more easily, that means that, 60, 75 years from now, when we're decommissioning a building, those components can be picked apart and reused. So always developing our products, especially this insulation, which, a fair amount goes into a building, but thinking about the future generation. How can a future use of this product be enabled by what we're changing today? Kind of make it better for now and better for the future as well. So I see that's the three main legs of the stool of where we need to go for the future. Is just every innovation needs to enable one of those two legs, whether it improves energy efficiency or enables lower embodied carbon now or for in the future.
Fantastic. Well, and I'd like to kind of come to a close with some of the reports and items that you've talked about where folks that are interested in this can learn more. You mentioned the ACC report, but you also mentioned some reports that DuPont puts out. Do you want to just talk about that real quick?
Well, yeah, anytime you want to learn about what DuPont is doing or specifically the shelter business, definitely look out for our sustainability report. I think you'll find it very encouraging, but also enlightening on, how we are making changes and making an impact for people, for the planet. And then the ACC recently commissioned an energy study with an organization called ICF, and they did these energy modeling. It's a really cool study. It's called the Determination of Total Carbon Impact of Plastic Insulation Materials. So it's obviously about plastic insulation, but it's not product specific. It's very product agnostic, but it really does a great job demonstrating the role of insulation on a building structure, whether it's a residential building or a commercial building. Like, what happens, how does the energy consumption of this building change if I take away from a fully insulated building, if I just take the insulation off the wall? And you can see, okay, the energy goes up 50%. So now you kind of have a feel for the magnitude of the role that insulation plays in your walls. And then in the roof, they can do the same thing. I think it's a really well done study. And we've actually reached out to ICF to talk more about socializing that study and really helping people digest it. So we're going to include that in our Building Science Summit coming up later this summer. So I would suggest checking that study out. The other one is the Global Status Report for Buildings and Construction. They come out with one almost every year. They were a little late this year, so we were anxious to see it come out. It was just released in April, and it's a really good place to go and kind of see how the built environment has been doing over the previous year versus historical, in terms of where are those carbon emissions coming from the built environment on a global scale, where are we improving, where are we not improving, and what does it say towards what do we need to do to meet the 1.5 degree pathway, which is the goal set by the Paris Agreement. What do we have to do? I think right now we're on a trajectory where we're going to have to reduce our global emissions from the built environment like 9% every year until the end of the decade if we really want to stay on track. So it can be a reality check, but I think it's important to understand how much more there is to do and to just keep that motivation going of how important is what we do here in the lab has that ever important purpose for the planet.
Fantastic. Well, Michal, I love talking to you guys. So thank you for being on the podcast and as ever teaching me things. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk to you. Thanks.